Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is Sidra Iqbal here, and I hope that you're having a wonderful day. This is another exciting and insightful episode of the Express Tribune webinar. This is in collaboration with Daraz, and of course, we have this conversation about navigating the digital shift. Since the COVID, I think Pakistanis have become far more comfortable with looking for online options, placing orders, and most of them, it can be very, confidently said, are rather happy with the purchases they make online. But this ecosystem has been evolving. What initially was a necessity because of the COVID smart lockdowns has now become a flourishing ecosystem where more retailers, traders, even the traditional, people who have been doing business are now trying to get into the digital space. So, what are some of the insights there? How are we navigating that as retailers, as marketplaces, and especially as consumers? We'd love to know more about the consumer experience. What are some of the trends that are going to impact us today and in the coming days? I have a wonderful panel here with me who will, of course, be talking about the evolving consumer behavior in Pakistan's e commerce landscape. And each one is a stakeholder, is a subject expert, has been keeping an eye, and has been bootstrapping and learning along the way. This, of course, was a new space for Pakistan 3 years ago, but it's growing because the internet penetration has grown, people have become more comfortable, and now it's a tried and tested method for many in Pakistan. Let's dive deep into this conversation, and let me first take this opportunity of introducing my wonderful panel to you. First and foremost, we have with us Mr. Ehsan Saya, who's the managing director of Daraz Pakistan. Ehsan brings over 13 years of experience across industries such as investment banking, logistics, and e-commerce. Under his leadership, Daraz was awarded the Gender Diversity Award by the Pakistan Business Council for spearheading efforts on gender diversity, inclusion, and equity. Thank you so much, Ehsan, for joining us today. We also have with us Mr. Salman Alana, who's the founder and CEO of Rider. This, of course, he started his career with Citibank, quickly ascending to Assistant VP of African Equities, where he spent about 5 years navigating the key markets from Nigeria to South Africa. In 2020, driven by the idea to enhance the e-commerce delivery services, Salman has launched Rider, a logistics company designed for the digital age's needs, demonstrating innovation and strategic clarity in a fast-changing industry. They currently are, they serve about 1,000 online sellers across 65 cities in Pakistan. Thank you, Salman, for joining us, of course. Our next panelist, of course, is Leila Sirhan. She is the General Manager, North Africa, Levant, and Pakistan for Visa. She currently serves as a Senior VP and Group Country Manager for North Africa, Levant, and Pakistan region, a region that serves about 15 countries from 5 regional offices. In this role, her team are focused on driving Visa's business growth in the region with key clients and partners from financial institutions, partners, and governments in support of Visa's mission to help individuals and businesses. Thank you, Leila, for joining us. Last but definitely not the least, we also have with us Mr. Fawad Ahmed, who is the Director for Strategy and Digital Transformation, Unilever. In his current role, he is, of course, building future fit capabilities in areas of digital commerce, digital hub, consumer insights, and, of course, UniOps, which is all about infotech. He thrives in leveraging the power of people and partnerships in building interconnected ecosystems. And that is, I think, the best way to describe the digital landscape as well. So let me first begin by asking my worthy panelists their opinion of the digital shift. I'm sure, depending on their area of expertise and their stake in the ecosystem, their understanding might be a little different from each other. So, Ehsan, if I may invite you to begin.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sidra, for having me. And I think to me, when you the right way to describe it, it's still in its infancy. Today e-commerce in Pakistan is maybe 2.5% of the entire retail market, and we see this easily doubling in the next few years. So it's at a very early stage. There's still a lot of maturity that needs to happen across the entire ecosystem. It's really good to have a lot of the stakeholders here. And along with these stakeholders, there's thousands of more stakeholders that are maturing with time as well. So, it's a very exciting space, and it's a very exciting time for the space in Pakistan.
And since you were pioneers in the business and you had a first mover advantage, how tedious did the was the need to actually continue filtering people out? Because as exciting as the idea may be, there's always that risk of people pretending to be something they're not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in the beginning when we were really trying to grow, our plan was really just get as much assortment as we can, and get as many sellers on board as we could. And over time, we really started leveling the playing field. And the idea was that we assume you're honest unless proven otherwise, but we really have a proper governance structure in place that if you don't play by our rules, then you're not welcome to play in our sandbox, right? And we've had years in which we've delisted thousands of sellers. We've removed millions of assortment, and over time we've also really tried to figure out that the priority and really focus on customer experience. And that evolution, I think, has been very important for us because we're really trying to make sure that the customer has trust in online purchasing. Whether
Right.
it's whatever they're buying, they really are, they get what they receive. If they're not happy with the purchase, making sure that you offer them a return experience. So today, for example, in Daraz, you have a 14-day return policy. In fact, in 20 cities, we will come and pick up the packages right from your doorstep for free. And the idea of all that is to just make sure that that experience is a pleasant experience, while we ensure that we have the broadest assortment of product at the best price. But it's not
Wonderful.
just enough to have product and price. It's really that experience of making sure that you prioritize the customer, and the seller, to ensure that you can win their trust, and that way get them to buy again and again, and something that becomes more of a lifestyle destination, not just a place where you come when you want to buy a phone. And that's the evolution we've also seen, is that people have evolved from just buying a phone to really buying their daily necessities, whether it's groceries, fashion items,
Absolutely.
health, be
In
on.
fact, in fact, that is the part that surprises me the most. And I want to take this one to Fawad. Fawad, especially during the COVID times, we saw how the fast moving goods market really benefited from the digital shift. What does it mean to you in a post COVID world, especially now in 2023? You have the supermarkets and the kone wali dukan, but yet people are moving to buying their shampoos, their daily need items through the online experience. What's
Right.
changing?
I think there have been three instances or crucible moments, as I say. COVID was definitely one. The other has been positively was how our startup ecosystem, with all the millions of dollars which came into companies and innovations, that also triggered some of that. And thirdly, I feel the government, especially the state bank, with its RAST, real-time digital payment platform, and equally now going into the digital banking side or e-wallet side, is or are trigger points which are helping us create the right ecosystem. Now, with being with Unilever, being a consumer goods company, we always say chase the consumer. And what we've seen is in the last 3 years, the consumer being almost 60% people under the age of 30 in Pakistan, which means around 130 million people.
Mhm.
Most of them now are getting their, generating employment through freelancing, so they're very tech savvy otherwise. And equally, when they see the entire ecosystem around them also moving more towards digital, their consumptions pattern are also changing, right? Gone are the days when the consumers would just go for big brands. Now you've got so many brands popping up day in, day out on Instagram, online, on sellers, on platforms like Daraz. And the youth is really active in seeking out best value for money and seeking out best experiences. And it goes back to what Essen was saying. Long ago, it was all about creating a brand and the consumer consuming it. It is now not just that, there is a lot of interconnectivity. So if somebody is buying a product of Unilever on the RAS, getting it delivered to their house through Rider and paying through Visa, all of those elements have to come in together for that experience. If one of them goes off, the entire experience of that journey goes off, and that then creates what Essen was referring to as
All the
confidence.
pillars are equally important. They have to be
Right.
moving together very well. I want
Yes.
to take this one to Leila indeed. Leila, I feel Pakistan is still perhaps scratching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to online electronic payments. People are still far more comfortable making a cash on delivery payment. Is that going to change anytime soon? Would that be the real digital shift for Pakistan?
Yeah, thanks, Sidra, and hello everyone. Thank you for having me today. So, I mean, definitely what we've seen, if I want to describe the digital shift that we're seeing, whether it's in Pakistan or across the region, I would say I would use the word exponential, right? We've seen an exponential growth, specifically, and I think my fellow panelists already talked about it, the COVID impact on consumer habits. Obviously, what we still see in Pakistan is there's still a lot of cash. There's still a lot of people using cash as their main way of paying. But on the other hand, when we talk to small and medium businesses, and in 2021, we've run after COVID a survey around the recovery of small and medium businesses. 8 out of 10 of those small businesses actually said that digital payments are important for their business. They're important for their business because they want to go online and they want to be able to get, I mean, to get the best way to pay, but also the best way to be paid through actually digital payments. So there is a consumer work that needs to be done, definitely, in terms of building the habit towards digital payments, whether it's through financial education early on, or by providing them with the right, I would say, the right tools for their digital payments. And at the same time, from a small and medium business perspective, there is a need for them to start adopting those digital payments. So this is the trend that we're seeing. It's then how do we build an ecosystem that brings it all together, right? And I think Fawad that mentioned this. It's an ecosystem that needs to be built. So it's the Unilevers of the world and the Daras of the world and the Visas of the world that need to come together and actually build that ecosystem at all of those levels, whether it's the tools that we provide to consumers and small businesses and the financial education that we need to provide to both sides as well.
Mm-hmm. If I may probe you a little bit more about the C to B, the B to C and the B to B experience there. I mean, yes, we understand that the ecosystem, both regionally and locally, is growing exponentially. But what does it mean for a Pakistani consumer if they'd like to make a consumer purchase from an online store that is not located in Pakistan, that is not quoting its price in Pakistani rupees? What happens to the visa experience there?
So the visa, I mean, our work is really about. I talked about being the best way to pay and be paid, right? Our work is really one is ensuring that his payment experience works, right? And that's a lot of work that we do with our partners, the banks and the fintechs and the wallets that are actually issue that Visa card that you can use externally. So ensuring that this card works, and here comes many of our AI-based tool around risk management, fraud management. We know that the fraud doesn't happen only on the consumer side, but could happen as well on the merchant side, right? So this is the first thing that is important for the consumer. You want to use your card, you want to make sure that this card is actually working. It's also about providing a seamless experience from a checkout perspective, right? You want to make sure that it works, but it's also secure. And if you're putting your credentials, your card number, your Visa card number online, you want to make sure that this card is secure. And this is where a lot of our security offerings come in terms of the authentication that needs to happen behind this transaction and making sure that this transaction is secure. One of the technology that is now quite widely used and that we are bringing to many of those online merchants, but also to the banks, is tokenization, where you actually issue a token that is behind your 16-digit card number. So your 16-digit card number is now masked, and it's not an important information. What's important information is the encrypted token that is behind it, and that makes the transaction more secure. Of course, I don't expect every consumer in Pakistan to know about this, right? Maybe I'm talking a lot of technical terms, but here comes the education that needs to be done jointly.
Absolutely.
And we've been running many of those campaigns in terms of how do you stay secure as a consumer, and what are the measures that you need to take so that you remain secure and increase
You're
their
absolutely right.
confidence.
You're absolutely right. And I think as an additional filter, as an additional barrier to possible fraud is when banks give you a consistent OTP for each of your transactions. Like you need to request for that to authorize it and make sure that it's you and not a bot or somebody making misuse of your card. But I want to take this one, the next question to Salman. Salman, a lot of times people see the biggest advantage of online shopping is, okay, if I change my mind by the time it arrives at my doorstep, I really don't have to, there are no liabilities. I'll just return it. I wouldn't have to pay for it, or I wouldn't have to wait for a return because it was anyways cash on delivery. What's the cost of a returned package to the business and all those involved?
Absolutely. I think this is a flaw, right, in the DNA of our ecosystem, specifically here in Pakistan. I know it exists in other cash and delivery markets, but perhaps it's a little bit exaggerated here. And the reason why it's a flaw is that it can be used and abused without accountability. And that means that both the logistics partner can turn around and say the customer changed their mind, and there's no way to validate that. And the customer can also change their mind without any recourse. So while I know that us as an ecosystem and partners, from this digital storefronts like there are to the logistics companies like us, we're working on ways of how do we, either give the customers sort of an understanding on, you can't just change your mind. It should be for a reason, and this is the way you would process the return through the system. We're working with, different fleets to ensure that the fake deliveries and fake attempts aren't abused in that aspect. But in terms of the cost, that is still about 15% of overall GMV of our system.
Wow.
So for every, let's say, 100 rupees that is spent online, 15 rupees comes back to the online seller. And in some cases, with some partners, it can be even as high as 25 rupees or 25% that comes back. So it's a big cost, and absolutely, I think it's a flaw in our system that we're working on.
Salman, what about the fact that if people would like to order a payment on delivery, but right now instead of cash, we really don't have alternatives, whereas certain product service delivery riders would have like an online gadget, like you can make that payment through a Visa card or any credit card. Do you think how far are you from building that into your system? And will we see a day soon when riders will be carrying that kind of a device, a tap device, or anything that enables electronic payments on delivery?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good question. So, when the day comes where the fleet, whether it's our fleet, whether it's any other logistics company's fleet, is fully digitized, and all the delivery agents are carrying around a smartphone or a pilot of some sort, then yes. So in our case specifically, all our riders in their mobile phones, in their apps, they're able to take digital payments. So they can come to your doorstep. They can integrate with your wallets, with Visa, etc. The question though is how big is that funnel? So if there's only 2 million credit cards per population of 200 to 20 million people, we're almost already on the back foot. Then coming down to the fact that the NDR or the transaction costs for wallet and for credit card is still quite high, where customers aren't willing to absorb. So to answer your question, there is a time where I think we will be digitally converting at the doorstep, but we still need to ensure that we get the fundamentals in place.
We are some steps away from that. Coming back to you, Essen, then in a cluttered and ever evolving, growing marketplace, what does loyalty mean to the RAS? How do you make sure? I mean, you basically connecting the consumer with a possible trader or a retailer or a merchant. How do you ensure people keep coming to the RAS, and how do you define customer loyalty?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think obviously the best way to really measure that is a repurchase rate. Are your customers coming back, and if so, how often are they coming back? Right? How many times in a year do they shop? And so we really try to focus on two KPIs here. One is the retention numbers, that if you did shop, did you shop again? And then, like I said, number two is order frequency. Like if you shopped, how many times in a year did you shop? And both of those try to address two different things. One is that from an experience perspective, did you have a smooth experience? And then secondly, what drives order frequency is having a breadth of assortment across various categories, and categories that you're more likely to repurchase. Like you spoke with Fawad about FMCG. That's a category that people generally will need to purchase again and again.
Yes.
You have something like health and beauty, and those sort of and what we've done in the last year and a half to 2 years is really try to make sure that the assortment that we have is able to drive that repurchase, and with that really come up with engaging ways for people to be on our platform, right? So you shouldn't just be on Daraz only because you want to shop. We've you may be watching your cricket on Daraz now, right?
Yes,
So
we saw
yeah,
that. Smart
so
move.
yeah, so you come onto the app, and you sort of spend time watching cricket, and then through cricket, then you might go and actually purchase things, and you might see on the bottom, you might see products that you want to buy. So the idea is to be able to really engage with them, and then secondly, be able to provide them categories that are appealing to them. At the end of the day, like Fawad said, is chasing the customer. What does the customer want? And that then drives really the loyalty. And by having categories that drive that repurchase, you're able to really make sure that customers look at you as a lifestyle destination, and not just one that I want a discount or I just want a phone, but really things that work on the day-to-day value to them.
I think a natural segue from this, this very insightful piece from you would be to Fawad. Fawad, how are you looking at customer loyalty? Because again, you have multiple touch points. Your customers can get the same shampoo bottle either on the Raz or at an online, any other store. How are you measuring the growth in digital space, and how important is it for you? Is it just like cherry on top, feel good factor, let's see where this goes? Or are you actually measuring customer loyalty? How many people are coming back and continuing to purchase online?
Yeah, it's a good question, and thank you for that. And I think it's a good segue indeed with what Essen was saying right before this. It boils down to, again, customers have different needs, and as a consumer good company, are you in a position to offer those needs? Is the key question, and assortment does play a very, very critical role. Whether I'm able to provide something to the consumer or the customer which they want to pay a certain price for, and do it in a way where I make money, the retailer makes money, the logistics makes money, and so the economics of it become interesting when it comes to e-commerce, whereas they're simpler, even though they're a little difficult to manage given the current circumstances offline. But digital or e-commerce is a big strategy play for most companies, if not all, today, because the consumers are moving digital. And there is an opportunity, because digital, unlike traditional avenues, you can't track performance the way that you can on digital. So it does help organizations building those capabilities and then tracking, tracing your consumers in a way where you can have a very meaningful relationship with that's the ideal marketing state, right? Where as a company, I can talk to you as a consumer directly, know what you like, know what you don't like, and then create the content in a language which you understand best versus bombarding you with stuff which you don't understand. I think digital gives us that opportunity to do that. Companies are still behind the curve on this, honestly speaking. But I think a lot of, as Alel also mentioned, there has been exponential growth. There has been a lot of work that companies have worked on. And like I keep saying, it will take all of us to work in a concerted way, understand what the consumer wants, build up products and consumer goods in a way which then helps consumers consume them in the right way. And at the same time, and this is where it gets interesting, in all of this, all of us here on the table and the consumer should make it worthwhile for their wallets. Effectively, all of us need to make money in the process. So
Right.
that's where I think collaboration comes into play. And in terms of your question around loyalty, I think SN answered it well because they're able to look at loyalty on e-commerce on their platform much more sharply than I can as a marketer. But for me, loyalty is all about if a consumer is going to be loyal to my brand, so they can buy it from anywhere they want, from any seller, from
Yes.
any platform, from an offline, online store. But what I ideally want to do is drive loyalty of a certain brand, which day in day out they trust and they're willing to pay either a premium or.
Right. Fawad, you made a very interesting point about at the end of the day, everybody should be
even just
making money. So if I can take this one to Salman. Salman, you have a fleet of riders. Of course, I'm sure there's a lot of screening, filtering, training, and development involved. But in terms of a lot of service delivery models, people go in with the understanding or the assumption, like you have servers in a restaurant, that they'll probably be tipped. Is that a way of the way you look at your fleet as well, that okay, if these guys are making a delivery, yes, I need to provide for their fuel, there'll be a certain commission that they're getting, but do you have a built-in understanding that if not all but a certain percentage of the customers will probably also tip your rider? You mute, Saman.
Sorry about that. So in our business model, where we mainly focus on e-commerce, the tipping culture is slightly different maybe than from a food delivery point of view. But we do want to maximize the payouts of our fleet, right? And it's, of course, is the altruistic side of creating employment and ensuring that people can run their households. But there's a very selfish business side to this as well, which is I need a supply of fleet to serve my customers. So the commercial aspect is driving me to continuously, pay out incentives. So what might be considered as a tip from the end customer, we're converting into an incentive based on either performance or efficiencies, or we're trying to give them, different revenue streams, whether that's logistics as a service that we've launched, whether that's certain biometric products that we've launched, which have higher payouts. So we're always trying to juggle that to ensure that
Right.
that fee is paid
Salman, can
competitively.
you give us some insight about this? I mean, looking at your fleet, are these full-timers? Are these hustlers? Are these people with a ride who probably want to do it part-time, have a couple of hours, maybe let's make a couple of deliveries, I've signed up. How is this model working? And if you can give us some percentages of people in your fleet who are full-timing as riders or delivery, people.
Yeah, of course. So 80% of our fleet right now is full-time employees. So at
Okay.
any given time, 80% are on our payroll and have all the benefits as a full-time employee. 20% are the gig economy or part-time workers. And the
Right.
reason why we keep that balance is we can scale in peak times by increasing the percentage of gig economy in our overall fleet.
Okay. Some may argue that when you're a part of the fleet, it's a very time bound, age bound profession that you can take up. You can probably be a rider for a couple of years. You can be riding around town making deliveries. But as you grow older, it's probably not going to continue being easier. So what's the kind of growth, development, skill enhancement that you're looking for so that these people can continue earning what they are as your fleet members?
Yeah, absolutely. So the good thing is that to work in our company as a delivery agent, you start very early on the mobile phone, right? Because the entire process is done digitally. So it's relatively much easier for them to grasp and to train themselves into moving from delivery tasks to in-house operations tasks. And just to give you some numbers, out of our 64 branch managers, we have 3 which are former riders or former delivery agents. And that's a branch manager, right? That's someone who runs the show for the city. We've got another 12, which are operations managers indoors. We've got another 24, which are operations executives. And, there's this constant funnel. It's still maybe not as large as we would like, given the size of the workforce. but we have seen that trajectory, especially for the ones who
Right.
want to progress.
And another thing which is happening in the Pakistani market that we often don't speak about is the unprecedented economic pressures, the inflationary trends and the pressures that are coming on. Leila, is there anything innovative to combat that? And do you notice a lot of price sensitivity in the market? I mean, whenever there are bumper sales or people are getting like a slash down in prices, what have you noticed? How does it impact the consumer behavior?
No, definitely. I think, especially those days, we're not. I mean, we don't have a blind spot, and we do see that these are tough economic days, not only in Pakistan, but I believe across the region. Inflation has been a real problem for a lot of people right now. I think we want to look at it in different ways, right? From one perspective is how do you enable small businesses in actually going digital and getting that digital payment experience at a much lower cost. And I think you mentioned some of the technologies that are available out there, maybe not proliferating in Pakistan at this point, but we've been looking at it very closely actually with the RAS in terms of, okay, how do we equip those riders, drivers, delivery people with a low cost payment solution, whether it's your normal phone, your normal Android or Android phone becomes your payment solution through technologies like tap to phone. We've seen QR codes being something that is also a good way for people to, or a cheaper way for people to accept digital payments.
Okay.
The ways we also try to drive to talk about loyalty, right? I mean, one of the ways we try to drive loyalty is around having evergreen campaigns and offers that alleviate people from that provide some discounts. The one area we're seeing is growing, especially in those times, is the area of buy now, pay later, right? And we've seen tremendous growth around buy now, pay later. I think it's coupled, one, because many fintechs have invested into the technologies and are now providing the right technology that you can enable at the point of sale. But also people have seen it as a way for them to be able to, make that purchase today, but maybe with installment payments, the purchase becomes a little bit easier on their wallet.
Just a little disclaimer out there. The later is defined for my viewers' sake. It's not like later, inshallah, I'll make the payment. No, it's a defined period. Your card details are with them. You're probably opting for an installment-like setup. But Leila, coming to another very serious issue. Recently, again, looking at the inflationary pressures and the economic situation, Pakistan has had some policies come in which are restricting imports, which are actually trying to discourage people. How has it impacted the merchants? Because there's an upper limit set now of how much you can spend online, whether you're stocking up, whether you're asking for machinery, whether a gadget is coming up. The duties have also gone up. How has that impacted the digital space and the e-commerce?
I mean, definitely, tough times require sometimes tough decisions that some governments need to make. I think Pakistan is not isolated in this region in terms of making putting such measures in place. There is going to be pressure on the merchants, that's for sure. One, in terms of supply chain and being able to bring enough of the goods to their consumers and to meet the consumer demand. And then if that bringing more of these goods is going to be more expensive, it's going to be passed on to the end users. What we hope for is obviously that things get back a little bit more to normal in some of those countries, and I can name a few, a handful that I actually work with merchants and consumers and banks every day: Egypt, Pakistan, Tunisia. All of these markets have had these kind of pressures.
Right.
It is what it is until things get much better. Yeah.
Right. I do want to look at Pakistan as a macro. Fawad, I want to bring this one to you. I mean, people in the top cities, if we look at KLI, Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, are significantly well versed in making purchases online. But it is usually a surprising shock to us when we look at the trends, the data usage, and the online shopping experience of some of the smaller cities. How is that working out? And if you can give us any insights into the trends there.
Yeah, internet's a bit sketchy, but I'll try to answer this. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. You're absolutely right. We do get a lot of growth from non-KLI cities as well. And equally, what we've seen is that in terms of the inflationary pressure,
Yes.
they're more on KLI than they are in the smaller cities because of how the economic activity is tied up to either agriculture or other areas. Whereas in big cities, it's usually tied up to mostly employment, which, as we all know, is under stress with the economic condition. And I've always said, and when you look at the data, is Pakistan is a story of two halves currently. You've got you used to have a decent sized middle class which is struggling, and therefore some of them are getting more affluent if they're making the right choices, and so they become really rich, and the economic conditions don't impact them as much. Whereas a lot of the other they impact they're heavily impact. Just to give you context, 3 years ago, 50% of a household's income used to go into two things. 50%, yeah, which was utility bills and your grocery items. Today, 4 years later, 3 years later, 66% of their income goes into these two things. So consumers are really being choiceful. And to your point earlier on about loyalty, have to make choices. They have to ensure that they are, optimizing their budgets because their incomes are not going to grow as fast as, say, the inflation. So they really have to optimize their budgets. This optimization happens much, much more in urban centers than it does in rural. Having said that, in rural, it's a peak and trough because it's linked with your economic activity of agriculture, where there are your kharif and your rabi crops, and the cash flows in cycles. So therefore, they consume in cycles as well. And we've typically seen Q4 of the year, which is right now, and Q1 of the year is very good in terms of consumption. But your lean period of agriculture is where the debt goes up, and the consumption comes down. So you've got to design your organization and your brand strategy for the urban, which in Pakistan is around 40% of the population, and then separately for rural, which is around 60% of the population. And these are vastly different economic conditions that you've got to deal in. So again, understanding the consumer habits and making sure that you design your product, working with the partners who are some of them who are on the call, can help you win in these tough times even. And we've seen this in Unilever. We continue to gain growth from rural. It is a key call out for us, even though there is stress in urban that we see today.
Very true. But I think since you mentioned Q4, the fourth quarter, traditionally that used to be a dull period for retail and for shopping. And I think we should give credit where it's due. The Raz had something to do with turning, the 11/11 and this season around. But what we got from you, Fawad, was valuable insight about the FMCG market. Essen, usually when we look at the middle class, of course, it's under a lot of pressure. Whenever they have a little space, we see them investing in white appliances, in gadgets, in digital things. And that is usually marked as, an upward surge or an upward stride into a different strata altogether. If you could give us some, insights there. We feel because of the COVID, a lot of people needed to invest in laptops, in some way of connecting online because there was a lot of working offline. We also see a boom when it comes to content creation of TikTokers, of YouTubers. How is this continuing across Pakistan?
Yeah, I think, excuse me. Look, I think, there's obviously an effort from our side on sort of making October, November, December, a very healthy season. 11/11 is starting in a few days as well. And one of the things you'll notice as well, it's very interesting, given inflation, someone's purchasing ability in terms of the number of rupees has not increased that significantly, while inflation has gone up,
Yes.
quite substantially. So what you've seen is a lot of brands actually just change the features that they offer. You can ask Fawad about the price of Knorr packages, and that they've gotten a little bit smaller. But you've seen this in electronics and home appliances as well, where maybe a year ago, Dolan's was selling 1 ton AC at a similar price. Now they're selling a 0.75 ton AC. Because the people's ability to purchase hasn't increased. And I mean, the best example is there was nihari made at home the other day, and I had lal aate ki roti brought, but the size, either I'm eating a more lal aate ki roti, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think the size of the roti has gotten smaller.
Yeah,
But the
everybody's been shrinking about, things have been shrinking. Oh, it's just winters. Things contract in winters.
yeah, exactly, that's what it is. So the roti was contracting on the way home, but but it's actually it's a very very interesting point that Fawad said about sort of the way you're looking at your product, and the features element is actually quite important at this time. And you've seen this now in the home appliances significantly, where you're having brands compromise a little bit more on the features, to be able to appease where the customer's wallet is, because the wallet is not shifting the same way. Whereas people are willing to say, okay, do I really need, do I really need all of these features? Can I get rid of Wi-Fi on my AC? Yeah, I probably can. So that's been an interesting element. And I think we're when you have events like 11/11, which obviously take a boost for all industries, but electronics takes the biggest boost because let's face it, you don't log in at 12:01 to get Alu for a little bit cheaper, right? You're gonna really try to make sure you get an 85-inch TV or something like a laptop or a TV or a phone, and those things generally attract people a lot more. And what we've noticed is that people are a lot more sensitive to pricing. So this time we've been working a lot closer with the brands, the banks, ourselves. You may have seen the billboard saying, "Ek arab ke discounts." Because we know the sensitivity on that is also quite heightened at this time. And people will buy ahead of time, whereas AC season might be happening in the new year. They'll start buying now to be able, if they can save the money. So we're forecasting a good healthy growth for that, for at least the appliances space, and I would say in the next few days.
Okay, Esan, I have a sticky question for you. A lot of times it is assumed that smaller merchants, or it's actually the merchants who benefit from your sales. They end up buying things in advance, just like you said. They take advantage of the sale price, and then they end up selling it on full price. How do you make sure that doesn't happen?
This is a question Fawad and I have been discussing for years. In fact, when I first joined 5 years ago, Fawad was like, "Hey, you have to fix this," and it's a very valid point, because and it doesn't happen just in your appliances. It can also happen in a lot of FMC,
every
right?
industry.
So we have, and that's actually the beauty of tech and data, is that you can start clamping down. I mean, I think we look at everything except your DNA now, to try to make sure you're not, and we have very intelligent people. They'll replicate device IDs. They'll do a lot of different things, and we try to put in place the most advanced technology to curtail that, because at the end of the day, we also want to make sure that it goes to the customer. That's where your price.
But I do want to know, what are you playing up against? I mean, is it bots? Like, are merchants using 100,000 bots who are individually making purchases? Is there an upper limit to how much I can purchase during the 11/11 sale? How are these things in place? I mean, how are you making sure?
If you're a credible customer, you can take advantage of all the discounts that we have available. But what we do is we try to see that if you're starting to, and I'm only going to give a few of the trade secrets, because then otherwise people will catch on. But for example, like if you're replicating devices, if you're making new accounts, and there's another 600 variables that we're looking at. But if you're trying to fool the system, that's how we try to catch you. But if I'm honest, do people still find loopholes? Absolutely, they still find ways
Okay,
to.
another thing that really is standing out for me is the part where you said we take almost everything except the DNA. So there's a lot of data, and there are a
Yeah.
lot of partners who are sharing that data. So as
Yeah.
a consumer, as a customer, my first question would be, how safe is my data? Salman, I
Yeah.
want to bring this one to you because usually a rider would have my number if he's trying to make a delivery to me. And you have a very high turnover of the riders. How do you ensure that my ID, my details are not going to get misused?
Yeah, I think that's a valid question, and that's something that's constantly evolving as we're learning as well. But there are certain technologies like masking of phone numbers that we've implemented. So instead of a rider seeing Sidra's mobile, they will just dial a central number. It's masked from there. So we're protecting you on that. Having said that, there still might be some communication between you and the delivery agent. Maybe it's like a location pin or something. So it's this constant, training of the delivery agents as well, looking at their statistics, looking at their performance. We get feedback from the customers. So as soon as the delivery happens, you get an SMS saying, how was your experience with that delivery agent? And based on that rating, we have internal questions with the fleet. So it's a very real-time loop. So if there's any bad actors, they're caught out not a week from now, a month from now, but they're caught out on day zero. And
Right.
that's how we kind of control.
Just to reverse engineer to the last question, Saman, what's your take of how e-commerce is growing in other cities of Pakistan, especially because you're catering to 65 of them? What's the appetite like in cities other than KLI?
It's mind-blowing, both on the consumer side as well as the seller side.
Mhm.
So Faisalabad, for us 3 years ago, 4 years ago, was not really a key market, right? Today, I have a seller in Faisalabad who's just two people, right? And they are selling honey online. They're doing
Right.
more orders from their house than the largest fashion retailer does in Pakistan
Wow.
with their whole setup, right? So from the seller side as well, we've seen them coming lean, being digitally native, I would say, on the commercial side of things. And then from the consumption power as well, we're seeing a huge uptick there. They might not have access to the stores that we do here in tier one cities, though the working dynamics are also different in terms of men and women who's working and who's staying at home. So I would say it's almost more of a need over there to provide online delivery than it's a necessity in most of these tier two cities than a good to have.
Right. Again, going back to the data-driven question, Leila, I think it would be the most critical leg for you. Information about an electronic card, visa details being shared across platforms. How do you ensure, and what are some of your, protocols in that regard, which are in place to ensure that your customer feels safe and secure?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. I think data privacy privacy and security have to be at the top. This is financial information. This is information that people value. So obviously, we work definitely with our partners, the banks, the fintechs that issue those visa credentials to ensure that one, we comply with the local rules, but also as a global company with many of the global rules that exist, whether it's the California Act or GDPR in Europe or other data privacy rules. And here is where you use a lot of the technology, right? I spoke about tokenization being one technology where there's very limited data or I would say sensitive data that needs to be shared for you to complete a transaction, where you mask your 16-digit card number. There are other ways as well and technologies. I mean, I think Salman mentioned some of the things that they do from a commerce perspective. We have a big hope with AI being also able to help us in in advancing many of those technologies and advancing a lot the digital commerce experience.
Wonderful. Fawad, I want to just understand the shopper mix a little bit more as well. We know about their purchasing power. I want to know, is it only me who tends to fall into the trap of online shopping post midnight? Or am I joined by a big group of people who do this and they end up thinking, oh my God, what was I up to? What are the shoppers like? Gen Z versus millennials? Women, we get a lot of memes around how women are spending a lot of time and money online. But
Yeah.
is it only women who are shopping online?
Well, here's the thing, which is very interesting in Pakistan, at least, is you were speaking about data security. And so consumers being consumers, what they do is when they're registering themselves, they don't register themselves often as women. They don't give their actual details. So when the Essence sends us data, at times 80% is male data.
Okay.
But we know from other cues, and that's where data stitching comes into play. This is what they bought, what their interests are. We're then able to see what was the profile of the person. And I think Pakistan being a very diverse country, I think it's all across. I do feel our age band of around 30 to 45 is the most, I think, still affluent in the country. And so I think they buy most of, if not all. And they're usually also buying on behalf of other people, especially
Right.
online and even offline. Yeah, when you go in the store, somebody would be buying on behalf of the entire family or their friends or whatever. Sometimes that's what happens. So a bit difficult to give you precise numbers, but we do feel that the people who have most money usually, and the decision maker, which is usually a female, is who is usually then making that decision. And they're using the credit card of either the husband or their brothers or fathers, and that's how they also manage the security situation around that. I think
Fawad,
it boils down to people also taking care of their own security, which they do. But generally,
in
when you
terms, Ji, in terms
go,
of social behaviors, do you think e-commerce is also helping sort of, allowing people to jump over the brown bag, protocol that used to be in place? I mean, things that we were not very comfortable buying on the offline in the stores, for example,
right,
things pertaining to personal hygiene or personal items, and they
right,
usually the purchase would happen and then the shopkeeper would put it in a brown bag and hand it to you. Do you think
right.
most of that has shifted online as well?
That's a tough
In the
one, to be
comfort of
honest.
your home. Yeah.
Well, the convenience factor is absolutely there. It is much more
Yeah.
secure. People feel that they're not facing any humans in the process.
Yeah.
But as Essen said, they probably know more online shopping or shoppers than an offline shopper would.
I'm going
Having
to
said
take this
that,
one. Yeah, I'm going
yeah,
to take this one to Essen. Essen, have
yeah.
you managed to get us across and just bypass the brown bag ordeal?
Yeah, I think it's actually a very interesting one because this is where we see
Yeah.
a huge surge in buying behavior because of that privacy that you can maintain. In like you said, in like personal hygiene, in sexual hygiene and well-being products, you sort of see those those categories gravitate very naturally towards e-commerce, and not just in Pakistan, globally as well. And we've at least seen a huge surge in growth on that. And it's very interesting when Fawad mentioned on sort of the female buyer. It's very similar when we look at it. We actually have our data science teams have done a lot of work to actually be able to figure it out, because someone will register as a male, but the categories that they're inclined towards are females. And for us, it's very important because, to be honest, we've been doing a lot of effort to attract female buyers. Because females are better buyers, and they, like I said, when we focus on retention, loyalty, order frequency, females tend to be a much better and more attractive customer. But when you look at the data, it sort of keeps saying that no, the men are the ones that are buying. But like Fawad also said, oftentimes the women will be using the male member's phone. They'll be using the male member's credit card. But they'll be oftentimes the decision makers. But when you look at just pure sort of cursory level data, it'll say, "Hey, look, it's all the men that are doing this." shopping, but it's actually at the end of the day the decision maker is females. And I would also say that you are not one of the oddballs that does buying sort of at midnight. You look at actually 9 to 12 is when you see a huge surge in shopping, when people are sort of maybe put their kids to sleep and are sort of going over their grocery list for the next few days, or just surfing, and I was trying to entice them with maybe you want to buy this.
So when there's a lot of masking and pretend happening, just like you mentioned, the buyer could be a male or a female. How do you actually maintain data? That's one part of my question. And then secondly, as you secure the gender diversity award from the Pakistan Business Council, what does that mean to the RAS? I mean, are you trying to get more merchants who are women so that they have an equal go at it? Are you trying to attract more buyers, or is it in terms of the RAS team itself that you would like to have more women working the various roles?
Look, at the end of the day, at the onset of the business, if you're trying to get to address the needs of 50% of your customer base, which is women, you have to have an employee base that's diverse enough. You need to have a seller base that's diverse enough. So today, the RAS has 100,000 sellers. Of those, 30,000 sellers are female. Which
Wonderful.
I mean, if you go to Zena Market, if you go to any of the bazaars, you're not going to find female sellers at that magnitude. And what's amazing is 25% of those are outside of Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. So it's not just the main cities where you're getting female sellers for. In fact, my mind is always blown when I attend the seller summit. In fact, you've done a digital one with us a few years ago, but if you attend in person, it's so interesting because you see such a diverse base of individuals coming. You see kids that are like 17, 18. You have women that are that run the household, but they also have a flourishing business. So for me, actually, I think the Gender Diversity Award really means that we're able to make sure that our mission of uplifting community through the power of commerce is very well ingrained in the gender diversity side of it, because you cannot uplift a community unless you uplift its women. So today it gives me a lot of pride as well that about 25 or 30% of our staff is women. In fact, my leadership team is 50-50, 50% male, 50% female. And so those, at the end of the day, I'm also doing that to make sure that 50% of the customers, their needs are addressed. And so we've done a lot of things to make sure that making sure that we're not only equal towards women's, ensuring women's rights, but also we're facilitating women even more, so that the RAS is a workplace that is a sort of a top choice for them. And honestly, I think Unilever is sort of the bar for that. They're the stuff that Unilever does. I always learn from and try to mimic and replicate, because they do some phenomenal things for ensuring that they can attract more and more women employees.
Right. But Ehsan, what I would love to see it, just like you said, 30% of your merchant base now comprises of women. Leila, that's not translating into 30% of the merchants having bank accounts in their name. I mean, women are still using the male members, just like it's mentioned. I mean, we're using the men's credit card, and at the same time, when we're doing business, we're either using our fathers, our spouses, or our brother's bank account to get the money in. When do you think the real shift there will happen? Because there's a huge campaign by the State Bank of Pakistan banking on equality, again, encouraging women to have their own independent merchant and bank accounts. How far are we from that?
So I think two things I want to talk about. So one is definitely financial literacy, financial education, right? People associate, our merchants associate the fact of having a bank account or accepting digital payments as, oh my God, now I'll have to pay taxes and I have to do this and I have to do that, versus actually understanding that there's also more that you can get. Access to credit, because now you have a history of actually what you're doing. You can get access to better insurance, and et cetera, et cetera. So and one of the things that we've done with the RAS is actually that financial literacy for all of these small and micro merchants, taking them through a full certification so that you really teach them, okay, what is it to be financially included?
Yes.
And what are the advantages for you? So this is from one side. The second one, and I think there's a lot of culture shift that needs to be done around women getting into the entrepreneurship place. So we've run an SME digitization index for women specifically, and we run it in Pakistan. And we learned that 99% of women entrepreneurs in Pakistan actually want to digitize their business.
Yes.
And 87% want to use online platforms to actually sell their stuff or sell the services that they have. So there is definitely a big demand to go there. Now, what are the platforms that are available to take them there? I'm glad that Ihsan is talking about the diversity of the merchants. One of the things that, and we just launched it last week, is we actually launched with HBL last week, is She's Next. She's Next by Visa, which is a global competition, but we run it locally for actually women entrepreneurs. And what we do is not only we give them financial, a kind of a financial grant for them to grow their business in the short term, but we also give them a year long of mentoring on how do they develop their marketing strategies better? What is the next product that they need to launch? What is the next market where they need to go? Plus, we give them access to the Visa Global Network and the Visa Network. And many of those will bring them to Ihsan, will bring them to others, so that we offer to them that power of the network that we run, whether it's at the country level, regional level, or even at the global level.
Yes, I think that's really powerful with all the actors working together. But I think before we close this conversation, it wouldn't be right if we don't include Salman's perspective in it. Salman, the merchants are doing a great job. Of course, the customers have their confidence and are paying their, placing their orders via these platforms and marketplaces. What happens when the package reaches home? How many times does a woman answer the door? And do you think the experience is different if the package is for a lady and if it is for a man in the house? Is the experience any different?
I should hope not, and I would want to be optimistic and say that it really shouldn't be, and it should be kind of a seamless experience regardless of gender and age. Having said that, we do always have to keep an eye out on the fleet, and we do get feedback constantly. As I said, we bring the end customers to share feedback. Even our customers, like let's say Daraz, share feedback with us on any complaints or behavioral insights that come their way. So it's a constant process. But the good thing is that as we're establishing ourselves, in the e-commerce logistics space, the fleet also knows that we're here to stay, right, as a company. So the longer they're with us, it's in their best interest to comply with policies that we want to introduce. It's in their best interest to behave well, to ensure that the end customer gives a 5-star rating, because it all adds into their compensation. The longer they're with us, sorry.
Do you also give feedback? I mean, does the fleet also give feedback about customer experience?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have some very very bizarre cases, and often we end up we have to share it with our partners. So sometimes I'll sit with my Daraz counterpart, and we'll come up with some of the strangest stories.
I think it has to be based on mutual dignity and respect, just like we expect the delivery fleet to be respectful towards the customer. I think it's only right to expect the same from the customer, that you have to treat a person with dignity. It would have been very interesting to know how many times out of 10 is it that a woman answers the door, and that's the data I was looking for, but perhaps we can save that for a later date. But guys, 11/11 is round the corner. This is Pakistan's biggest sale that's brought to you by Daraz, and of course you can avail discounts and amazing prices, and there's a price cut of about ₹1 billion. That's huge. And I also noticed that the communication has become more family oriented. Initially I used to see a lot of young people talking about how excited they are about discounts, but now, being sensitive to the social shift and the economic pressures, I see a married couple talking about how they've been waiting for the sale and a lot of purchase will be made. Any comments on that before we close?
Yeah, I think everyone has been talking, this Mehengai ka bhoot that we want to sort of bust. I think it's, to be honest, it's at the end of the day, it's the reality, right? People are really, really, it's not easy times. People are feeling a lot of pressure. And we wanted to make sure that at the end of the day also to ensure that we get the order volume, the growth. We need to work with all of the stakeholders, whether it's our 3PLs, whether it's our brands, our payment partners, to make sure that we can pass on these cost savings in an economical way, that we also continue to grow, and we all the stakeholders continue to do well. So the idea is that that's, at the end of the day, this is what the people are feeling, and not only do we have to be sensitive to that, but we have to figure out a solution for that if we want to continue growing. It goes back sort of the customer obsession part. But if you're going to be oblivious to that, then you won't be able to do it. So that was the thought behind it.
Absolutely. And it's about being sensitive to the ground realities, the pressures that people are facing. Just like Fawad was mentioning, 66% of whatever every household is earning is moving towards either utilities or just groceries. So that's, you're left with only 33% of your dispensable income, through which comes all your expenses that need to be met. Well, thank you so much, Ehsan. Thank you, Fawad. Thank you, Salman. Thank you, Leila, for joining us for this webinar. I think this conversation was very insightful. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with all of you, and I think we learned a lot about the e-commerce ecosystem in Pakistan, which is growing and which is showing some really positive signs. One of my favorite sayings these days is, I'm not optimistic, I'm not pessimistic, I'm determined. So with determination and working together in collaboration, I'm sure we'll be able to reap more advantage out of it. Thank you guys for being here. And for all our viewers, do send us your feedback and your comments. Do let us know if there is anything that you particularly enjoyed, and if there are any questions, feel free to send them to us in comments. I'll see you next time with another webinar with an interesting conversation here on Express Tribune. Till then, take good